Kurt Cobain was standing backstage at the Seattle Center Coliseum when he saw a face that made his blood run cold. It was a face he'd tried to forget for 10 years. His high school music teacher, Mr. Richard Patterson, was walking toward him with a backstage pass hanging around his neck. What happened in the next 15 minutes would prove that sometimes the people who doubt us hardest end up witnessing our greatest triumphs. It was November 7th, 1993, and Nirvana was at the peak of their fame. In Utero had just been released to critical acclaim, and tonight's show at the Seattle Center Coliseum was a homecoming. This was the city where Kurt had struggled, where he'd slept in cars, where he'd been told his music would never succeed. Now he was headlining an arena with 15,000 people screaming his name. But standing in front of Mr. Patterson, Kurt felt 17 again. Small, powerless, filled with rage. The memories came flooding back. Aberdeen High School, 1983. Kurt had walked into the music classroom with his battered acoustic guitar, ready to audition for the advanced music program. He'd been playing for 3 years, writing his own songs, developing the raw style that would define grunge. He was convinced Mr. Patterson would recognize his talent. The audition lasted exactly 4 minutes. When Kurt finished his original song, Mr. Patterson looked at him with pity and contempt. "Kurt, that's not music. That's just noise with words. You're playing all the wrong chords, your voice is untrained and frankly unpleasant, and your lyrics are depressing teenage nonsense. My advice? Give up on this music fantasy and focus on something you might actually be good at." Kurt had stood there, guitar in hand, feeling punched in the stomach. "But sir, this is what I love. This is what I'm good at." Mr. Patterson shook his head. "No, Kurt, you're mediocre at best, and the music industry is brutal to mediocre talent. I've seen hundreds of kids like you. None of them make it. You won't either. Trust me, I'm doing you a favor by telling you this now, before you waste years chasing an impossible dream." That conversation haunted Kurt for years. Even after Smells Like Teen Spirit exploded and changed rock music forever, he could still hear Mr. Patterson's voice. "You're not good at this. You won't make it. Impossible dream." The words became fuel for his fire, but also a wound that never healed. And now, 10 years later, Mr. Patterson was standing in front of him backstage, acting like they were old friends. "Kurt," Mr. Patterson said, extending his hand, "it's so good to see you. I've been following your career. Quite impressive what you've accomplished." Kurt didn't take his hand. He just stared at this man who had tried to kill his dreams. His security guard noticed the tension and moved closer. "Do you remember me?" Kurt asked, his voice quiet, but with an edge that made everyone nearby stop. Mr. Patterson's smile faltered. "Of course I remember. You, Kurt. You were one of my students. I always knew you had potential." The lie was so blatant that Kurt felt his hands shake. "You're lying," Kurt said. Several people turned to watch. "What?" Mr. Patterson's smile disappeared. "Kurt, I don't know what you told me I'd never make it," Kurt interrupted, voice getting stronger. "You told me my music was just noise. You told me I was mediocre and should give up on my impossible dream. Do you remember that? Or have you conveniently forgotten?" The backstage area went silent. Everyone was watching. Mr. Patterson's face turned red. "Kurt, I think you're misremembering. I was always supportive." "Don't," Kurt said, holding up his hand. "Don't you dare lie to my face. I remember every word. I've carried those words for 10 years. They've lived in my head, eating away at me, making me doubt myself even when I was succeeding." Chris Novoselic and Dave Grohl appeared, standing behind Kurt. They'd heard this story before. "Mr. Patterson looked around nervously. "Kurt, if I said something that hurt you, I apologize. I was just trying to prepare you for the harsh realities." "Harsh realities?" Kurt's voice was rising. "You weren't preparing me for anything. You were projecting your own failures onto me. You were a frustrated teacher who'd never made it, and you took pleasure in crushing dreams of kids who reminded you of what you couldn't do." The accusation hung in the air. Mr. Patterson's face went pale. "That's not fair, Kurt. I dedicated my life to teaching." "You dedicated your life to destroying," Kurt said. Do you know how many nights I wondered if you were right? Do you know how close I came to quitting? If it wasn't for Christ believing in me, I might have listened to you. I might have given up. And you would have killed something beautiful before it had a chance to live." Courtney Love appeared at the edge of the crowd. She'd heard this story, had held Kurt through anxiety attacks triggered by insecurities that trace back to Mr. Patterson. "I'm sorry if I discouraged you, Kurt, but look at you now. You made it despite what I said." "It proves nothing," Kurt interrupted, "except that you were wrong, dead wrong. And the saddest part is you're not even sorry about what you did. You're sorry you got caught. You came here tonight not to apologize for destroying my confidence, but to bask in my success, to claim some connection, to tell people I taught Kurt Cobain. Like you had anything to do with this." Mr. Patterson's shoulders sagged. Kurt stepped closer. "You want to know what you actually taught me? You taught me that people who are supposed to nurture talent often destroy it. You taught me that traditional authority figures don't always know what they're talking about. You taught me that harsh critics are often just bitter people projecting their disappointments. And most importantly, you taught me that when someone tells you you're not good enough, sometimes the best response is to prove them so wrong they choke on their words." There was a long silence. Then Kurt pulled a piece of paper from his pocket. Old, creased, yellowed with age. "Do you know what this is?" Mr. Patterson shook his head. "This is the paper I wrote your words on. The day after that audition, I wrote down everything you said. Not music, just noise. Wrong chords, unpleasant voice, depressing nonsense. Mediocre, won't make it, impossible dream. I've carried this in my wallet for 10 years. Through every show, every recording session, every moment of doubt. Every time I thought about quitting, I'd read it. And then I'd think, fuck that. I'm going to prove him wrong." Kurt held up the paper so Mr. Patterson could see his own words in teenage handwriting. "This paper has been my fuel, my motivation, my reminder that other people's limitations are not my own. So in a weird way, I should thank you. Not for believing in me, but for giving me something to prove. For making me so angry that failure stopped being an option." Mr. Patterson was crying now. "Kurt, I'm so sorry. I was wrong. I was so wrong about you." "Yes," Kurt said simply. "You were." Then his expression softened slightly. The rage transformed into something else. Not forgiveness, but understanding. "You know the really messed up thing? I'm standing here at the peak of my career, millions of records sold, 15,000 people waiting to hear me play. I've achieved everything you said was impossible. And part of me still hears your voice. Part of me still doubts. Because that's what people like you do. You plant seeds of doubt so deep they keep growing even after all evidence proves them wrong." Kurt looked around at his bandmates, his wife, the crew members watching. "But here's what I've learned. Success doesn't erase the wounds. What it does is give you perspective. It shows you that people who doubted you were speaking from their own fears, not from any real assessment of your potential." He turned back to Mr. Patterson. "So I'm going to ask you directly. Why did you say those things to me? Was it because you genuinely believed I had no talent? Or was it because seeing a passionate kid reminded you of what you'd given up in your own life?" Mr. Patterson wiped his eyes. "You're right. God help me, you're right. I had dreams once. I wanted to be a professional musician. I tried for years and failed. By the time I became a teacher, I was so bitter that I took it out on students who reminded me of my younger self. You reminded me of me, Kurt, and I couldn't stand it." The honesty shifted something. "I destroyed a lot of kids' dreams," Mr. Patterson continued. "Not just yours. I told myself I was being realistic, preparing them for disappointment. But really, I was just inflicting my own pain onto them. You're the first one who made it big enough to confront me. But you're not the only one I hurt." Kurt processed this. Part of him wanted to stay angry, but another part understood that Mr. Patterson was just another damaged person trying to survive his own disappointments. "That doesn't make it okay," Kurt said. "Understanding why doesn't erase what you did." "I know," Mr. Patterson said. I can't take back those words. I can't undo the damage. All I can do is tell you I'm sorry and I was wrong." Kurt looked at the old paper in his hand. Then he did something unexpected. He handed it to Mr. Patterson. "Here, you should have this. Keep it. Frame it if you want. And every time you look at it, remember that you were wrong. Remember that the kid you told to give up changed music history. And use that memory to do better. If you're still teaching, stop crushing kids' dreams. Start nurturing them. Because you have no idea which kid might prove you wrong." Mr. Patterson took the paper with shaking hands. "I'm not teaching anymore. I quit 5 years ago. Couldn't face what I'd become." "Good," Kurt said. "Then maybe you can spend the rest of your life making up for the damage." There was a long silence. Then Kurt turned to his band. "We've got a show to do." As he walked toward the stage, Courtney caught up with him. "Are you okay?" Kurt took a deep breath. "I don't know. I thought confronting him would feel better. I thought I'd feel vindicated. But mostly I just feel sad. Sad for that 17-year-old kid who believed what he was told. Sad for the bitter teacher who couldn't see past his failures. Just sad." The show that night was electric. Kurt played with an intensity his bandmates hadn't seen before. It was as if confronting Mr. Patterson had unlocked something, released a pressure valve building for 10 years. During Smells Like Teen Spirit, Kurt changed lyrics slightly, singing about authority figures who try to dim your light, about proving wrong people who said you couldn't. The crowd didn't catch the reference, but his bandmates did, and they played harder, supporting him through this cathartic performance. After the show, Kurt saw Mr. Patterson sitting on a bench outside, still holding that old piece of paper. The man looked broken. For a moment, Kurt considered walking past. He'd said what he needed to say, but something made him stop. He sat down next to his former teacher. They sat in silence, listening to fans leaving, cars starting, the city coming back to life. "You know what's funny?" Kurt said finally. "Part of me wanted you here tonight. Part of me wanted you to see what I'd become. Not to rub it in your face, but to show you that you were wrong. To prove the impossible dream wasn't so impossible." Mr. Patterson nodded. "You proved it. But it doesn't feel like I thought it would," Kurt admitted. "Because your words still hurt. Success doesn't heal those wounds. It just makes you successful and wounded." They sat in silence again. Then Mr. Patterson spoke. "I'm going to tell you something I've never told anyone. After you left that audition, I went home and cried. Because I knew, even as I said those horrible things, that you had something special, something I'd never had. And instead of nurturing it, I tried to kill it because I couldn't stand watching someone succeed where I'd failed. I've regretted it every day since." Kurt looked at him and saw not the authoritative teacher, but a sad old man who'd let bitterness poison his life. "You want to know the worst part?" Kurt said. "There are probably dozens of kids you said similar things to who actually listened, who gave up because a teacher they respected told them they weren't good enough. I got lucky. I had people who believed in me enough to counteract your poison. But how many didn't?" Mr. Patterson's shoulders shook. "I know. That's what I think about every day." "Then do something about it," Kurt said. "Start a music program for at-risk kids. Volunteer at community centers. Find kids everyone else has given up on and show them that one person's belief can make all the difference. You can't undo the past, but you can change the future." It was the closest thing to forgiveness Kurt could offer. Not a pardoning of sins, but a roadmap for redemption. The story of Kurt's confrontation spread through the music community quickly. Other musicians shared their own stories of teachers who'd tried to discourage them. It became a conversation about how education systems often crush creativity. Some fans tracked down Mr. Patterson, sending hate mail, but Kurt publicly asked them to stop, saying revenge wasn't the answer. Instead, he challenged them to prove wrong anyone who'd ever doubted them, to turn rejection into fuel for success. Mr. Patterson did start a music program, just as Kurt suggested. He volunteered at a Seattle community center, teaching underprivileged kids. But his approach was completely different. He encouraged experimentation, celebrated unique voices, and never told a student to give up. When asked about his change, he would show people that old piece of paper Kurt had given him. "This is my reminder of the damage I did when I let my failures poison my teaching. I can't take back those words, but I can make sure I never say anything like them again." Kurt never fully forgave Mr. Patterson. The wounds were too deep. But he did reach a kind of peace. He came to understand that his former teacher was just another broken person trying to navigate a world that hadn't turned out the way he'd hoped. And while that didn't excuse what Mr. Patterson had done, it made it comprehensible in a way anger alone never could. In interviews after that night, Kurt talked about the confrontation carefully. He didn't want it to become a story about revenge. Instead, he tried to use it as a teaching moment about responsibility that authority figures have to people they're nurturing. If you're in a position of power over young people, you have a responsibility to build them up, not tear them down. Your words have weight. They can inspire or destroy. And you don't get to decide 10 years later that you were just being realistic. You're shaping lives. Act like it matters. The piece of paper Kurt had carried for 10 years became a symbol in the music community. Other artists started sharing photos of their own rejection papers, letters, report cards, comments from authority figures who'd told them they'd never make it. It became a movement celebrating persistence in the face of doubt, of proving wrong people who'd underestimated you. Today, the story of Kurt and Mr. Patterson is taught in education programs as an example of the lasting impact that discouragement can have. It's used in discussions about nurturing creativity rather than crushing it. But perhaps the most important lesson from that night in Seattle is this: people who tell you you're not good enough are often just speaking from their own pain and limitations. Their words say more about them than about you. And while those words can hurt, while they can plant seeds of doubt that last for years, they don't have to define you. You get to prove them wrong. You get to turn "you'll never make it" into fuel that drives you exactly where you were meant to be. Kurt Cobain carried Mr. Patterson's cruel words for 10 years, but in the end, he also gave them back, transformed from weapons into a lesson about the kind of teacher Mr. Patterson should have been all along. That's not forgiveness. That's something perhaps more powerful. The recognition that even our deepest wounds can become tools for growth and change, if we're brave enough to confront them and wise enough to learn from them.